When drawing the pecs and the delts, the error isn't necessarily just being bad at drawing, but not understanding what you're drawing. So if you're drawing the pecs and the delts, the error is going to come from not understanding how they work and what they are. Because many times the mistakes I see are just not getting what it is. They'll draw the general shape, but then they'll make easy to fix mistakes, like just drawing the ball of the shoulder, like drawing it as a ball, but connected or like glued to the sides, rather than it fully connecting onto the torso properly, like to the clavicle and the scapula. And it's also not coming to a point, like onto the arm because it inserts at a point, or it's even just inserting in the wrong space, like it should go in between the bicep and the tricep, but many people will draw the points on top of the bicep, which doesn't make any sense. And with the pecs, they'll draw the striations just randomly, like not going to any particular place, and they'll draw it too long and too short, which is a really very common problem when drawing the chest, is the length of the entire thing. I see it drawn way too short all the time. And then, if you just knew the anatomy, and you knew how it worked, and you had some baseline proportions in your mind, then you would not have any of these mistakes. And so in this video, I'm going to show you how to draw pecs and delts using anatomy. And when you learn the anatomy, this naturally fixes all of the mistakes that are common to make. So let's get into it. The first thing I want to do is draw some of the common mistakes. So if we were drawing the torso straight on, so let's just do that really quickly. So here's my really quick, sketchy example of a torso. The first big mistake is that when they draw the delts, they draw it kind of just like a ball that's glued to the side like this. And there's two problems with this. The first is that it doesn't attach onto the torso. It's kind of just floating there on the side. So if I show you what I mean the correct way, if I erase this ball, is not to be glued to the side like that, but rather attaching up here on the collarbone. So it's going to come over here like this onto the torso. Like you can see this triangle like here, that is the torso, but it's also where the shoulder will be. So you need to have it cut in at this angle like that. And then from there, it's only going to be round on the one side. Like it's not going to be a ball all the way through. And this is especially important for when you draw poses where the arm is raised. So for example, if I go over here and we're going to draw the arm where it's raised up to the side like this, as if he's doing a lateral raise, and we just draw a ball all the way through and then there's the arm, well then that implies that the deltoid is down here on the bottom. But the deltoid is simply just a muscle that kind of wraps around on the scapula and collarbone like this up here, and then it comes to a point on the top of the humerus or the upper arm bone. And so for it to be on the bottom doesn't make sense. Like let me show you a 3D model of the deltoids. Here is a 3D model from Proco of the deltoids. And if we move it around, you can see how it's very round here on the outside, but it doesn't even exist on the inside because there's not the deltoid muscle there. And so drawing the deltoids as a ball is kind of a mistake because there's no other sides to the ball. But I can see how the problem emerges because, like, even on me, and I'm not even that muscular, the shoulder is very round, right? So that's the first big mistake. So if I were to show you the correct way to draw an arm outward like this with the deltoid, then instead of being a ball like that with the cylinder coming out, instead you would have the top part being curved like that. And then you would have a sort of S curve like this right there. And then out of that, you'll have the upper arm, like so. And this isn't a perfect drawing, but I'm trying to do this quickly so that I can keep your attention because it's so low. Now, the next thing about the delts is not getting this point correct. So let me explain to you the deltoid anatomy. I'm going to go back to the 3D model for this. This is a complete profile view, or at least very close to it. I'm doing my best. And I want us to just look at it really quickly. Let's see what we can notice. First of all, if I were to draw a line straight down the middle, let's see where it would land. So I'm going to go starting up here at the top, and I'm not in Photoshop anymore, so I can actually draw the line. So just pay attention to my mouse. If I go straight down the middle, I'm going as straight as I can, like this, still going all the way down. And what do we see? Where is the point? The point is further in front of halfway down. So when you draw the deltoid, you need to make this point go forward. And also, notice how the top of the deltoid has this curve, but how this curve overall slants downward as you go back. Like I'd say that about here is the top of the deltoid in the back, and here is the top of the deltoid in the front, and it makes a slant like this. Now, the next thing I want to point out is the three heads. Now, this is a very detailed 3D model, and so it's a little bit harder to notice the three heads because we see all these things that look like heads. So I'm going to hover my mouse over the division lines for the heads. Right here, look, you see this division right here? This is the division between the lateral and rear head, right here. And then, right here, is the division between the front and lateral head. And what I notice is that this is the point down here where the lateral head and the rear head are overlapping, right here, down low. It's almost like just completely smoothing together. But then the lateral head overlaps the front head all the way up here. And so it's going to make a more sharp transition when going from the front head to the lateral head, but a more soft and smooth transition from the lateral head to the rear head. When drawing the delt from the front and the back, it's important to keep in mind the tendon. So whenever you look at any kind of anatomy diagram, the red areas are the muscle, and the white areas is the tendon. So if we look at the front there's basically no tendon. These deltoids are basically all red. And all red means all muscle, and so that means it's going to be full. It's going to be thick and juicy. But then if we go to the back, we can see much more white around this top area where it attaches to the spine of the scapula. And so that means that starting around here, you're going to remove any of the like bulgy juiciness of the deltoids. And that's one way they're different from the front to the back. Okay, so now let's go back to Photoshop where I can draw some more for you. The things that I mentioned were where the point is on the deltoid, what the slope of the deltoid is, and how the tendons affect the shape. Also, I mentioned the points where the deltoid heads overlap, right? So let's draw some. I'm going to draw in a more simplified way because those 3D models are complicated and harder to understand what the deltoids look like. So first thing is I'm going to make this side the front and this side the back because I'm drawing it from a profile view for starters. It's going to slant this way. The next thing is I need to find halfway down and then move slightly forward, so like this. This point here is closer to the front than the back of the deltoid. The next thing I'm going to do is draw the shape of the rear side. And I'm going to try to keep it relatively smooth, like this. I'm not going to try to add too many indentations or anything like that. And now I'm going to draw the lateral head. I'm not going to draw just the front head. And you'll see why in a moment. This is the edge of the lateral head, kind of like this. And then, now I'm going to draw the front head, and that's because the point where it overlaps is so much higher up that it kind of makes a sharp turn in the deltoid. So it might look a little bit like that. And then when I add in the rear head, it's going to kind of just smoothen in with the rest of the rear head like that. And also, if you didn't already get this, the middle head overlaps both the front and rear heads. And when I say lateral, I just mean the one in the middle. And if you don't know what lateral means, it just basically means outward this way. And so this head is the lateral head because it's furthermost outward. Now, if we drew this from different angles, here's what we'll see. First, I'm going to just draw it from straight on the front in this box. What we'll see is that you won't see the rear head because it's in the back. It's going to come to a point like this. And then the front head is going to go like that, and then it's going to have like a turn there, like that. That's basically the front view. And then the back view is going to be very similar to that. The back view is going to look kind of like that. But this time, we're going to see a lot more of the rear delt. And it's going to seem like the bulge of the rear delt is going to stop lower down because of the tendon, because this space here is going to be tendinous. So that's why I have it curving this way, where if we continued it, it'd be going like that. And I also, personally, I don't know if this is quite accurate or not, but I kind of make it where the rear head overlaps the middle head like that. One of the biggest mistakes, and I see this all the time, is when they place this point incorrectly in comparison to the biceps, triceps, brachialis, and all that. And so really, really quickly, I'm just going to show you how I would draw the arm muscles on this deltoid. And so I would have the tricep over here in the back. The triceps are pretty big. I might be going a little bit too big with that, but whatever. And then you'll have the elbow down here, and then the chest right there. And so you'll have the biceps coming down this way like that. And if I were to give more detail to the divisions of these muscles, the biceps are basically going to do like this, right? So this point goes in between the biceps and the triceps. And so from a front view, the biceps come straight down from here. Like this is the biceps. Like if I go to red, the biceps are going to be here and here, where the deltoid, and I'll do this in another color as well, makes this curve around the bicep like that. And then from the back view, you'll see the triceps out here, where you'll have the long heads down here like this, and then the lateral head like that, and then here would be the tendon area and the elbow, and it would look sort of like that. I think the back muscles would cover this a little bit, depending on the pose. Maybe the tricep will cover the back muscles. Again, it depends like where you're placing your arm compared to the back. Next, we're going to go over the pecs. Now with the pecs, the biggest mistake is drawing them the wrong length. So I'm going to show you, like from a straight on shot, the proportions I have in my mind to get it accurate. Now, the cool thing about this is that these are ones I completely created myself. As an artist, what you'll realize is that you'll come up with your own proportions and mental tricks to get things right. Because I haven't ever heard these specific proportions from another artist or online before, because they're kind of weirdly autistically specific and kind of, what do you call it? Personalized to me and my work. And so let's go over them. If we draw the head, it's going to look like this. It's going to be flat on the sides and then round on the top and bottom. Have the brow line right there, the nose line there, the chin line there. And you've got the neck coming down. And then the collarbone, the top of it will be about there. And you've got the traps going this way. Let's draw a center line. To find the belly button, I'll count 3 heads. So I'll go 1, 2, 3. And it should be somewhere around there. So let's say this is our base sketch of the human figure. Here is how I would find the bottom of the pecs. So if you don't know already, that the pecs, if you don't know already, the pecs attach up here on the collarbone. So the top of the pecs is basically the collarbone. And so now we just need to find the bottom. So here's what I do. I imagine this sort of ridge or this indentation here in the forehead. It's kind of like a third up from the eyebrow. So I imagine that about right there. What I do to find the length of the chest is go from there to the top of the collarbone and then copy that distance down. And it should be about there. Let me see how accurate I got that. Yeah, right about there. This line will be the bottom of the pecs. That's how I find it all the time. I see them draw the pecs too short. Even professional artists like David Finch will draw the pecs too short. I think he is doing it on purpose to be more stylized, but to me it just looks weird. He makes the chest way too short, way too flat, especially for how muscular he draws the figures. So now, let's go over some of the anatomy with the 3D models. Again, these 3D models came from Proco. Let's see what we can notice. First, let's start with what it attaches to. I can see it attaches to the collarbone up here. It attaches to the sternum down the middle, and it even looks like it attaches to the ribs or even the cartilage of the ribs down there. And then, as for where it inserts on the humerus, this upper arm bone right here. That is very important where it inserts on this upper arm bone. And the reason why is because when you move your arm, the pecs are going to move with it. So you can probably look in yourself in the mirror right now, like take your shirt off, and see how the pecs change as you move your arm around, even if you don't have much muscle. You'll notice that if you raise your arms up like this, they're going to look really flat. And when you put your arms together like this, they're going to look much more round and full, and that's because they attach to the arm, right? And this is also going to be extremely important for how we draw the striations, because, look, they fan out from this point here. Now, I need to tell you something very important about how they fan out. Notice this section of the pecs right here. And then the section beneath that, and then the sections beneath that, and the sections beneath that. What do we see? We can see that the ones on top overlap the ones on the bottom. So basically, if it attaches higher up, like on the collarbone, it's going to overlap and connect the lowest on the humerus. But the lower down, like down here, it attaches or originates. The higher up, like you can see up here how it's crossing over, the higher up it's going to insert. So if we go back to Photoshop, the pattern is going to be kind of like this. And that's going to be important for how you draw the striations. So now let's actually draw the pecs on this man right here. Now, I don't have any specific proportion in mind for when I do this, but I eyeball about around here and here for where the pecs start. And then they're going to go outward like this. And then they're going to turn in, and it's going to kind of make a hexagon-like shape, but it's going to kind of indent in the middle as well. So turn like this, and in the middle, it converges, and that's basically the shape of the pecs. And then, to continue with the theme of the video, pecs and delts, let's go ahead and add the delts. It's around this point that I think the front head of the delts come out. So I'll draw the front head like this, and then we'll draw the side head like this on top. Maybe I'll draw the whole side head first, and then the front head. And then we'll just erase this part of the torso that's being covered by the delts. And so this is the basic shape of that all. Now, if we were to add the striations on top of it, if you want to make them really shredded and jacked looking, the way you would do it would be to start from this point here and kind of draw it curving over the top. Now, you could make it connect down here on the sternum, or you could even change the angle some and make it go up here, or whatever, right? Because if we go back to the 3D model, you can see there's just a crap ton of lines, and you know that there's going to be a lot of variation depending on genetics and how muscular each part of the chest is, etc. And so you need to keep that in mind. It's up to you. And then when you're drawing more striations, you need to kind of have it where it overlaps the other ones. And sometimes the overlapping will happen underneath the deltoids. So let me change to reds to make this extra clear. Right here is the front delt. Right here is a striation of the chest. And right here is the other edge of that striation. And even though you can't see this one here overlapping this, it's implied to be overlapping that underneath the delts, because if I were to continue that line, then you would see it overlapping. And then right here, I'm having this one clearly overlap that, and then here I would draw like another one that's being overlapped by the one above it. And that is how you'll make realistic striations. Now, you don't want to draw these across the entire chest unless you want it to look like they have 4% body fat, which is extremely unrealistic. So let's make it look like they have more like 9% body fat. And so to do that, instead of drawing the line all the way through, what I would do is I would imaginarily continue this line. And then near the middle, like this, I would draw some of the striations really short, kind of like this. And then like right here, I would imagine continuing this line, and then draw a kind of indent there like this with that line to show how it overlaps. So that's how you draw the striations of the chest. Now, I want to do something really fun and also really helpful for learning how to draw really anything, and that is to trace images. So what I'll do is I'll take some of these images of the bodybuilder Andre Dieu, and we're going to study how his chest looks. And he's even in several different poses as well. So first of all, trivia question, is this here his deltoid or his pecs? The answer is his deltoid. Shit. Fuck, no, it's his pecs. The answer is his pecs. But the weird thing is, I can see it clearly above the bicep, because the bicep is this muscle there. So how does that work? Well, as I said earlier, the pecs attach to the upper arm. So we'll even see it right there above the bicep. And so if I like trace this really clearly, and I think I'll use cyan for this, what we'll notice is how this is going that way. And then here's the overlapping I was telling you about. It's overlapping like that, see? Next, let's check to see how long his pecs are. So if I put my nail, and you can't really notice this, but I'm taking my fingers. If I put my nail right on that ridge on his brow, and then on the top of the collarbone, and then copy that distance down, and then I'll mark it, I get right about here. That is where my measurement got me, which you can see is extremely close to the bottom of his chest. And that goes to show how long the chest actually is, because many people will draw it like up here, I'll notice. Like artists like David Finch, they make the chest really short, and it seems to be like up here where they draw it. Now let's look at the pecs from a different pose. This time, they're stretched out, and as you can see, they have less curve to them. So like if I go back to this one, I can see how this curve is going like this. Like look at the sharpness or the extremity to that curve. But then if I go to this one, look at the curve now. It's kind of just flat. It's flattened a lot because you're literally flattening the pecs. Because if they attach on the sternum and collarbone and insert on the humerus, when you bring the humerus away, it stretches it, and when you bring the humerus close, it contracts it. And so now the pec muscles are very stretched out. Now another pop quiz is right here, the edge of the pecs or of the delts. The answer is the edge of the pecs. And so I used to think that you draw the delts there all the time, and so I draw these incorrect shapes. And if you look, like this is the chest here, and so if we continue this line, that's going to be the chest as well. And then once again, if I follow this striation there, and then this one there, and then this one there, and then even maybe you consider this part of the chest, you can see the striations and how they overlap once again. And then from this view, because he's not only just raising his arms like this, he also has them like kind of turned like this. You can only see the front delt. You don't see any more divisions in there. The side delt or the lateral delt is rotated to the back because of the way he's turning his arms. Now let's move on to tracing the delts. Now there is a term on the internet, usually in bodybuilding spaces, called 3D delts, and that basically means having delts that look good and are big, juicy, and round in all angles. And so if you really think about how the heads work, if you grow the lateral head, from a profile view, you won't notice the bulge of the lateral head because the bulge is facing directly at you. But from a front view, you would see a lot of lateral head. But then the thing is that if you have a big front delt, then you won't notice it from the front because it's facing you. But from the sides, you'll notice how the front delt went forward and forward. So on the bodybuilder Andre Dier right here, you can clearly see how big the shoulder is just if we go from here to here. It's so wide. And then if we go back to like one of his straight on shots, like this, you can see how round the shoulder is as well, like this. And so let's trace his delt right now. Let's see what we can notice. So here's the point where it connects. And then if I draw on top of the striation, it will go like this. And then it goes around here. I notice the line there. And then I notice how his rear delt is curving like this, smoothly going into there. But then how his front delt is kind of sharply turning out, going this way. And I kind of have to imagine through the towel, but whatever. Or the shirt, whatever that is. Now, we can actually see a good bit of the top of the shoulder. It's kind of doing like this U shape, but in the anatomy diagram, it kind of slopes down like this. Why is that? Well, it's because we see some of the top. So if we go back to the anatomy diagram, and we start to look at it from the top view, you can notice how the deltoids are literally wrapping around like a U, around the collarbone and the spine of the scapula like a U. So the more of an upward shot, like where you're looking down on the person, the more of a U it will make. But then as you go further down like this, it's going to make more of an upside down U, like a rainbow, because now you're just seeing the size of the muscle rather than how it connects to the skeleton. And so here, instead, I might draw it looking a little bit more like that. So now let's just draw a little bit more. So now I'm going to just draw a drawing from imagination, trying to keep in mind all of these cues and tips. So I'm going to try to draw them sitting down with their elbows on their legs as they kind of hunch over a little bit. And that way we can see how the delts look and the pecs look in a different angle that we haven't gone over before. So we'll have them looking to the side, kind of like this. Then you'll have their sternocleidomastoid popping out because they're turning their head. I'll probably make a tutorial on the neck muscles in the future. Then they're going to have their collarbones making a sharper V because their shoulders are being pressed up because of how they're hunching down. And then the traps are going to be higher up because of that reason. So they're going to go a little bit more horizontal and big up here. And then if I were to draw the rest of their rib cage, first I'm going to start with the center line going this way. It'd be like that. And then their back. And then you got their pelvis like this. And then you'll have their legs. So now we have a base to put the pecs and the delts on. First, let's start with the shoulders because they're going to be more in front, or at least his right shoulder will be. So we know that they connect in the back, so let's draw this bump coming from the back, like on the spine of the scapula. And then we know that it's going to come to a point further forward than halfway. And then we also know that it's going to overlap more strongly with the front than the back. Then we'll draw the other one real quick, and this time we'll only see the front and sides delts rather than the rear one as well. And I know this is really sketchy, so I'll try to clean it up in the end. And then we'll draw the upper arms really quick. I'll just keep them as simple cylinders for now because this isn't a tutorial on arms. Then we'll erase what the arms are overlapping just to make it clear and not so sketchy. All right, now let's do the pecs. So let's try to follow my rule on following the brow ridge to the collarbone and copying that distance down. So I imagine the brow ridge be about here. Here's the collarbone, copy that distance down. So the bottom of the chest should be about here. Let's draw that all the way through, wrapping around. And then we can start adding on the striations like this. So I'm going to draw this one connecting there, this going that way. And we can add some mass to this side of the chest. Let's actually just simplify this whole side and add some mass to it, like so. Then we'll have a striation going this way. And I think that's all the striations I want for this pose. We can draw it indenting in the middle. Now let's clean this up by lowering the opacity of that layer and drawing a new layer.